In 1863, Peter fills in as a slave in a cotton estate with his significant other Dodian and their kids. He prays with his family until the white men come to drag him out, ignoring the children's pleas. When he finds out that he has been sold to a new owner, Peter yells and tries to break free from their hold, but the men immediately fire their gun at Dodian, prompting Peter to stop and accept to stand on his own on the cart. Sadly, the men are now seeking vengeance, so they hit him before dragging him once more. Through the bars, Peter promises his children that he will return for them one day, as they attempt to run after him in tears, as he and a group of other slaves are transported in a cage like cattle. They arrive at their new working location, which is the construction of a railroad, after a lengthy journey. Compared to the plantations, the conditions here are 100 times worse. The heads of the slaves who dared to disobey decorate the entrance as a warning. They sleep in cages, and the white masters will hit and insult them even when they behave well and work hard. Even worse, they use the Bible to support their actions. Additionally, there are a lot of wild dogs present, and they are sent after any slave who tries to flee. When a slave does misbehave, the boss, Fassel, may brand them on the face or shoot them in the middle of the field, depending on the circumstances. Other times, they are just whipped. Two men serve as Fassel's right hands, Harrington and Knowles, who was also purchased as a slave, but was selected to join the guards due to his hunting abilities. Peter does his best to behave, but he gets yelled at for daring to do anything that doesn't work, even when he tries to help Gordon when he falls. After all of the slaves have been returned to their cages one evening, they must watch as John is thrown inside, writhing in agony due to his branded cheek. Peter tries to console Tomas, a slave who is shaking with fear, by reminding him of his loved ones, and reminding him that this is just work. He also gives them the word of God, who is always watching over them. But John laughs at him because it's obvious that God doesn't care about them. However, Peter does not respond to the insult. Rather, he maintains his composure and promises to pray for John. Peter later overhears two white guards discussing significant information. After Lincoln freed the slaves, everyone who managed to escape is rushing to Baton Rouge for assistance. When a guard notices Tomas made a mistake with the food and intends to punish him, the conversation is abruptly interrupted. Peter comes to Tomas's defense and explains that he is just a young child. Fassel intervenes because he has taken a particular interest in Peter due to his attitude, and the guard hits him before pointing his gun at Peter, ready to kill him for such insolence. Later, when Peter is back in the cage, Fassel approaches him to tell him that he is his god, and that he is now Peter's dog. Peter responds that if that were the case, he should eat the same food as the dogs. At that point, Fassel simply giggles. However, the following day, he places Peter in chains and makes him stoop before him. While his canine continues yelping and snarling at Peter, a couple crawls between them. Presently, the canine has committed Peter's fragrance to memory. Peter tells the other slaves about Lincoln and Baton Rouge later during lunch, which they could reach after walking through the swamp for 5 days. Because it is difficult to survive the swamps, some of the slaves are hesitant. However, when Peter reminds them that they probably won't survive this location either, he gains the support of a few men. They only need to wait for the appropriate moment to flee now. Later, a slave dies while working, and Peter is forced to drag him to the pit, where all the bodies are thrown together. Peter ends up grabbing a shovel to fill in the pit, because there are some white deserters who should be digging. But as soon as they see Peter, they say a black man should do this instead. Peter waits patiently for the guards to be distracted by an explosion on the field, before jumping on them to kill them with the shovel, and steal a knife before fleeing. He is aware that this is the ideal opportunity for him to carry out the plan. John is able to steal a gun because the other slaves and deserters see this and take advantage of the opportunity to run, hitting a few guards along the way. Other guards sound the alarm and start shooting the runners right away, killing as many of them as they can before they get lost in the woods. Fassel also shoots, killing the deserters, but he screams for Harrington, Knowles, and the dogs to go after Peter, because he hates that he got away with it. Peter is able to form a team with 3 of his friends, and he leads them through the forest by listening for any approaching dangers. Tomas freezes when he sees the crocodiles, allowing the dogs to catch up to him. Once they locate the swamps, the majority of the team is able to cross without difficulty. Fassel calls them back after the beasts have done enough damage, and asks Tomas where the group is going. But Tomas doesn't answer. Fassel makes a deal as a result of this. He'll let him go if Tomas tells him where the others are going. Tomas, in fear, confesses what he knows and is allowed to enter the swamp. However, Fassel shoots him and allows the crocodiles to eat him as soon as he turns around. In the meantime, Peter, John, and Gordon wrap up crossing the bog securely. Peter suggests that they should take the other swamps, but John doesn't listen to anyone and chooses to take the horse trail. because he thinks he can stay safe with the gun he stole. Gordon wants to follow Peter wherever he goes, but Peter thinks it will be harder to track them down if they split up, so Gordon chooses his own route through the woods, after Peter tells him to follow Lincoln's cannon sound. After that, Peter decides for himself, only to find that his leg is bleeding, because he was hit by a bullet. He needs to take action right away, or the dogs will smell the blood, so he needs to run for a while to get away from Fassel. Minutes after the fact, Peter runs over a house possessed by a white family that likewise keeps slaves. Peter conceals himself behind a pile of logs, before grabbing a vine from a tree to use as a tourniquet above his wound. This permits him to go after some water from the siphon, and to see the garments holding tight a rope. Peter crosses the garden, takes a big chance, and steals a shirt before running into the forest. One of the kids in the family sees him and rings a bell to warn everyone. Fassel hears the noise and follows it to the house, where the family informs him of Peter's departure direction. Peter is running as quickly as he can, stopping only to use the shirt he stole to bandage his wound. He then takes off the shirt that has been stained with blood, and hides it in a trunk for the dogs to find. While he hides under the water of the swamp, Fassel and his men fall for the ruse and continue down the road, in the false belief that Peter has emerged from the swamp after the group has left. Peter thinks quickly and uses a thick branch to push the crocodile away, before using his knife to kill it. When it tries to attack him, Dodian wakes up at that moment from a nightmare in which she saw her husband in danger. The children awaken too and stress over their dad. However, Dodian guarantees he's alive, and that he'll come soon on the grounds that he's endured things no one else would be able. Peter takes cover on top of a tree at night, and uses a knife to cut off the swamp leeches from his body. His blood drips onto the plants around him because of this. In the meantime, Fassel and his men locate the dead crocodile, and open it to find nothing inside, indicating that Peter escaped through this location. Harrington actually compliments Peter for his skill when the group decides to camp out for the night and eat the crocodile. He receives an immediate reprimand from Fassel, who also reminds him of the lesson his father taught him. Black people will demand more and take things like their jobs and land, if you give them even a small amount. Peter continued to run the following morning, while covering his body with mud and animal feces, which means he is constantly surrounded by flies, but helps hide his scent. He prays to his Lord to keep the fear of the beasts at bay, whenever he has to cross another swamp. When the sun suddenly shines on him, he interprets it as a sign. Peter is fortunate to discover an abandoned treehouse with clean water and some leftover food. While Fassel splits his group to cover more ground, Peter uses the hot coals to heat up his knife to cauterize his leg wound, because there are also some hot coals. After that, he puts the coals on the empty bucket, and takes them with him when he climbs a tree to throw smoke at a beehive. This deters the bees and lets Peter take some honey. While Peter is already on his way out, Fassel sees the smoke and rides toward it. A snake is using the boat in the treehouse as its own hideout, so Peter carefully pushes it away with a branch, before hopping in the boat and sailing off while enjoying the honey. Dodian's master approaches her and informs her that he has sold her, and that she will leave in 2 days. However, due to the fact that her new master will give her a new husband, her children are not permitted to accompany her. Dodian makes a rather drastic decision to avoid being sold, because she is deeply affected by the news and still wishes to wait here for her husband's return. She pretends to be in an accident by going to one of the cotton production machines and sticking her hand inside. Back to Fassel. He finds the tree house with the help of his dog's nose and follows Peter's path as he crosses the river. Peter rushes into the woods, where he is surprised to meet John once more, who is enraged that the white men will now also pursue him. John ignores Peter after he teaches him how to disguise his scent, and swears that he is not being followed. After 1 minute, they hear the canines yelping and rush to stow away. Peter gets inside an unfilled trunk, while John scales a treetop. Even so, the dogs manage to follow John's scent, making it simple for Fassel and his men to locate him. John won't come down, so Fassel shoots him to make him fall before using violence to get information on Peter. John still won't talk. Fassel makes the decision to take his head and give it to Harrington and Knowles, so that they can send a message back to the camp with it. Peter prays for John's soul while closing his eyes to avoid witnessing his friend's death. When it starts to rain, Peter comes out of the trunk after waiting a few hours to put some distance between himself and Fassel. He discovers exactly how they killed John, which shakes him to the core. With grief on his mind, he tries to keep going until he sees a bunch of horses running by, one of which is on fire. Peter goes in the same direction they came from, and finds a plantation house with everything on fire and all the white people dead. It appears that the slaves in this area took matters into their own hands. After hearing Lincoln's news, Peter enters the house and slowly walks through the rooms with his knife out just in case. When he reaches the dining table, he immediately abandons all caution and jumps on the food and wine to refuel his exhausted body. He doesn't stop until he hears a strange noise coming from upstairs, and he follows it until he finds a dying girl trapped under a harp that she keeps playing as a cry for help. He continues to do this until he finds the girl. She is rescued by Peter right away, and he takes her outside and puts her on a table before trying to get water for her. But because she is afraid, the girl forces him to stay and gives him her cross pendant. Peter takes it knowing what she needs, a prayer that said God would be with her. Peter must drop his knife and move away from the girl to avoid being shot, because he is so distracted that he does not hear Harrington approaching until it is too late. Peter is so furious that he dares to violently turn around and use the cross as a stake to kill Harrington. After the girl passes away when he leaves her, Knowles also arrives at that time, but Peter quickly thinks and grabs Harrington's weapon to shoot him. Peter calls Knowles the worst kind and leaves him to die, despite his attempts to explain to him that someone who can kill crocodiles may join Fassel's ranks. Peter decides to run into the cotton fields for cover when he hears Fassel approaching because of the barking, and when the dog gets too close, he shoots it. When Fassel eventually discovers the body, his determination to capture Peter grows even stronger. Peter arrives at a beach that is littered with the remains of white men who were killed in battle against Lincoln's army the following morning. Peter can see the ships and hear the cannons in the distance, indicating that Lincoln's men are near, despite the fact that they do not have any food for him to take. Peter gets excited at the thought of finally being free and starts running again. However, a horse suddenly appears by his side and pushes him to the ground with a few blows. Fassel is the one who begs Peter for some of the meat he had requested in the cage. Fassel pulls out his gun and tells Peter he is his god because he won't obey. However, someone else shoots Fassel before he can fire. Before turning to meet Lincoln's native guard, led by Lieutenant Caillou, Peter tells the falling body that he is not a god. The soldiers take Peter to the infirmary tent on their camp in Baton Rouge, when his body gives in to exhaustion and hunger. The nun nurse stitches Peter's infected leg wound, and for a few days Peter only dreams about his family. Peter goes to see one of the soldiers when he feels better to get his new papers and become a free man. He has to make up some information, like his age, that he doesn't know. Sadly, he isn't permitted to leave and look for his family yet. The white warriors are exploiting the reality the slaves are actually taken stash, and give them two decisions. They can join the military or work on federal farms. Peter doesn't want to keep following orders, but the soldier convinces him to join the army, because it will help him save his family and be free forever. Peter then learns that the army has also found Gordon, who is still alive but hurt. While Peter is pleased to see him, he regrets telling him about John. After that, Peter goes to Caillou to get his uniform, but first, he is asked if he would like to help the cause by posing for a photograph. Peter is suspicious, but Caillou assures him that the white photographers are innocent and have good intentions. It turns out that these men are taking pictures to show the world the truth about slavery. Peter agrees to show the camera his naked back, showing the scars from hundreds of whippings. Peter is then taken to see the general, who inquires about everything he knows about the enemy's railroad. After Peter gives him all the information he has, the general looks at his picture and says that Peter's scars are a sign of disobedience, which is not a good trait for the army. Caillou tries to take Peter away, but Peter fights back by saying that his scars show that he has been beaten a lot, but he has never given up fighting, which is also important for a soldier. Caillou takes Peter and all of his soldiers to the trenches at dawn, where he delivers a moving speech to remind them that they are fighting for freedom. The group does not let the fact that many soldiers are wounded by enemy fire while they are still marching stop them from joining the fight. Soon, they are all surrounded by fire, and Peter is struck by an explosion, falling unconscious for a few minutes in a puddle. He drags his sore body through the mud, as soon as he wakes up to keep helping, shooting at the enemy whenever he can, and blessing any dying companion he sees in the way. Peter eventually discovers Gordon wounded after Caillou is killed in battle. He gets up from his hiding place and runs toward enemy lines, after seeing his friend in such agony and fear. His goal is to stop the cannons, and the native guard defeats their foes, and wins thanks to the soldiers who see him as an inspiration and follow him. The army goes to every plantation to free the slaves, now that the war is over. Everyone is shocked and unable to believe the news when they arrive at Peter's former residence. However, once they realize that freedom is actually real, happiness quickly takes over. Peter begins looking for his family after witnessing his former master's death at the hands of the justice system. When he fails to locate them, he almost experiences a breakdown, but when he starts praying under his breath, He looks to the side and lets God lead him to his wife and kids, who run to him and give him a hug. The photograph of the real Peter became an iconic piece of history, and was seen by millions of people worldwide. Over 400,000 black people escaped to freedom in 1863, as a result of Lincoln's proclamation. In America, nearly 4 million slaves were declared free in 1865.